Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us at another early edition, actually, of the Tuesday Tips. I am really excited to have with us back again Janet Taylor from Totally Organized. I also want to give her a shout out that she is well over the 31 years of accomplishment being in business, organizing folks, decluttering them, and getting them streamlined and organized in their homes, in their businesses. And so I am just so grateful to have her in this discussion while we talk about sustainability and maintaining a minimalist way and, organizing ourselves and decluttering ourselves in our home and as well as in our work life. So without further ado, I am going to bring Janet on stage and we are going to have a chat.
Good morning, Sharon.
Good morning. Well, happy Monday.
Happy Monday to you too.
And so congratulations again. Well deserved accomplishment. I was reading that in LinkedIn. I was like, wow, 31 years. That's, life, long time.
It is.
Helping folks decluttering and organizing. I'm
It
sure
is.
you've seen everything and anything under the sun.
Yes, I have. And it's actually, I did the math and it's almost been half my life. So, yes, but I love what I do. I love impacting people's lives and helping them really be organized, not only in their office and business, but also in life.
So let's start there in our starting point.
Mhm.
So, our topic is about sustainability, being a minimalist, and, thinking about that for some folks, what's that even look like? Like, where do we start in decluttering and then organizing? But then we get to the part of, okay, now we got a new life. Now we've organized ourselves. How do we anchor that behavior and how do we sustain that in the way that, we've either purged everything or put them in storage or somewhere thereof, that now we have space, we have breathable space that we can think, we can actually look at, different a different outlook in our home and our work life. So let's start there. Like, how do we keep the sustainability?
So, in order, excuse me, to keep the sustainability, we need to actually create habits, create
Hmm.
routines. So, and I tell people not to get overwhelmed and just do like one thing. Like maybe you're frustrated because when you come in, the entryway is just disorganized. So just focus on that area and developing a habit, not only for yourself, but all the members in the household, so that when you come in, you get into the habit of putting your coat away. You get in the habit, if you have a shoe closet or a shoe rack, putting the shoes where they belong so you're not stumbling over everything. And also, where do things go? For example, do you have a backpack? Do you have a tote? Do you have a pocketbook? Where do those things go? So just kind of create a routine like
Hmm.
that. But also in regards to just sustainability, minimalism, really, and I probably shared this with you before, Sharon, 80% of the stuff we keep, we never reference again. So sometimes it's going to those areas, just like we have an inventory in our office, having those inventories in our homes. What do we really use and eat in the pantry, in the bathroom, as well as other areas? And once you kind of downsize and only have what you need and what you use, it'll be a lot easier to stay organized as well as to maintain it.
Now, so let's take that from home to their work life, and then also in the
Hmm.
business environment. So in not everyone has an office, but if they do, that's a fortunate thing. And so, what would that office be like? Again, sustaining that now that we've, organized our office. And but if we don't have an office, we happen to be in a cubicle and whatnot, still is our space. So we've organized it. Again, same thing. Would you say the same and carry that over, like your habits and whatnot, into your workplace? And then when I say workplace environment as the third category, it's more of you were asked to go into a specific department or environment that needed to be organized.
So in those areas, and Sharon, I don't have an office. I just have like a corner in my living room, like so many of those probably watching. But even in those areas, it's really looking at what you're
Mm-hmm.
using. A lot of times, maybe a few years ago we were using certain tools, certain supplies, But now, as we kind of transition a little bit more to digital using things, do we need a lot of the physical
Right.
stuff? And it's also really looking at what you're using, creating systems for those, but also those habits. The habit is that at the end of your workday, kind of just maybe organizing your desk so you can see the surface the next time you come in. Or as you're working throughout the day, when you're finished working on something physical, does that need to stay on your desk? Can it be moved someplace else, etc.? So it's really looking at one, the supplies and the tools that we use and need, but also throughout the day, creating habits. Because I know for myself, once I finish a project and all that paperwork and information, I need to move it because for me, it's almost like a distraction. So I need to have my space clear of and only focus on what's on that
Now,
desk.
interesting you say digital because I feel like we can translate that how we are working off of paper, right? Off of paper
Hmm.
into
Hmm.
our digital space. So, like in our desktops, in our, we have a bunch of things that we've saved, documents and whatnot. So even though we're in digital, like you said, the habits can translate to digitally because if you're hoarding paper or if you're stacking up stuff on your desk, then your desktop is going to look the same. So I imagine that you would just do similarly. So what in the digital, like let's take the desktop for example. I got a whole bunch of
Hmm.
documents. I got folders or no folders. So what would that look like in terms of like, decluttering us? We got apps all over the place. Half of the time we might not even use the apps that we have. Again, this is our personal space, but in the workplace, obviously we have some apps that we need to use, but then there's also these folders, these things you like you said, you're in a project, your project's winding down. Where does that go? Where does it transition? Like what kind of decluttering and organizing that you would also do in your digital space?
So in a digital space, specifically at work and your desktop, get into the habit when you begin to work on these projects. For example, it would be the Taylor project. Create a
Mhm.
folder and just begin to put every document in it. Don't just save it, have it a destination. So moving forward. And then also, as you're working on projects and you realize, oh, yeah, I did this document or spreadsheet, etc., then begin to move it where it needs to be. Because what happens is the desktop gets so cluttered and sometimes we just save things and we never give it a destination. So therefore, we're wasting a lot of time and energy looking for things that is probably right there in front of us. So, taking that next step, and I know sometimes you feel like you just, inundated with so much work, but taking that next step and creating that folder. And even within that folder, don't have too many folders. Maybe have three. Maybe you got your finances, maybe you have meeting notes, maybe you have just project information, but organize it because what it does, it increases your effectiveness and efficiency, specifically when you're working on teams. Another team member may need, the reports you did from the third quarter last year. You can easily just send it to them then and say, I'll have to get back to you. You're trying to figure out where it is because you created it, so it's somewhere. So that's what I would do. And even with your apps, just create sometimes, even if we just organize our apps. I know sometimes people are like, well, that's a little bit too much, but it makes it easier if you see the apps you use and you know exactly where they are and they're not kind of, they're lost not only in the documents and the folders and all the things on your desktop, but in a personal life, it's time for us to get rid of the apps we just don't use because we keep adding them to our devices and we keep piling them on. And then there's apps that probably we haven't even used in the past year or so. So at work, just organize those folders. And then in our personal life, just get rid of some of those apps we don't
So
use.
as I was listening to you, you mentioned Teams. So one of the things that I noticed in Teams, you can create a folder, a project folder, where you can add people that are participant to that, Teams folder. And so whatever you upload, they have access to it. That's obviously shareable content, but the things that are not shareable content, you kind of have to store that in a different place. Now we all have cloud storage, right? So some of us utilize those. Now let's That could also be like the dumping ground, right? You kind of be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna upload that all there, and then your cloud starts to, get filled up, and then like how often should you start to think about now, you just finished January, like how often should we start to purge and start to clean stuff out, in our digital storage spaces, be it your folder, be it, the cloud storage and et cetera and whatnot. So is there like a tickler that we need to remind ourselves in the calendar to say, oh, you know what, March, May, I don't know, April, May, I'm just making it up, that, to
Mhm,
start to
mhm.
do that?
I think it depends on your work cycle. Like if you work on projects every 90
Mm-hmm.
days, and then every 90 days you get a new project, then that's possibly a time where you just make sure everything is organized so before you take on that next project. Or if it's every 6 months, waiting a year might be a little bit too long, but or even, really think about your workflow, because some people have to turn over things, they have to do reports every month. So making sure that everything that you need for that report is organized in a folder, and then you can move on to the next month. So doing things like that, but creating not only your own system for the organizing, but also how long do you need to keep stuff. Now, of course, the cloud allows us to keep stuff forever. So then just really decide what needs to be on my desktop, because sometimes we do have to work on those documents and files every single day. So you do have to have it accessible. But for that archive,
Mm-hmm.
you know, moving that to your actual cloud-based system. And like you said, giving people access, because a lot of times with these programs and these apps now, once you try work on a project and it's updated and everybody else has access to the updated information. And that could be part of just the communication. Like we are going to create this folder and everybody's going to have access to it who needs to have access to it, because we're all on the same project. So therefore making sure that everybody saves it to that particular folder, so we don't have to have five and six and all of these different spaces and places where stuff is organized and actually stored.
Got it. So now I have two things I want to ask you.
Okay.
Receipts, right? We still get a little bit of both. We get paper receipts and we get digitized receipts. Um, unless you're using it for business that are specific for that, then you would, keep that into your folder and whatnot. What do you say about receipts? Certain things that you want to keep, certain things you're trying to toss. Because I'm pretty sure some of us, in our wallets we have receipts, or some of us have left it on the desk and we're like, oh, what is that even? It's some kind of reason I want to hold on to just in case I may return it. Never returns it, but still has the receipt.
Hmm. So in the workplace, definitely you should really almost kind of just schedule it so that at least once a month you're doing your expenses. Because I know so many people, they're trying to get the expenses in before the cutoff. At least once a month, organized, because that's the amount where you can handle. Because when you're talking 2 and 3 months, it kind of, it makes it your time and your energy. You're really spending a lot of time in it. So at least once a month, do them. Now if you scan them or if you got paper, but at least do those expense reports at least once a month. Now in our personal life, it's time for us to really sometimes let go of those receipts that really we don't even need. Okay, we all go grocery shopping, whether we do it online or we just do it in person, but really, do you need to keep those receipts? Once you've consumed the food, do you need to hold on to it? Also, if you come across a receipt that really the ink has just faded and you just all you have is a blank receipt, it's okay to let it go. And even in our personal life, if you do have to keep track of expenses, maybe you're doing major renovations and you just want to make sure that you're keeping track of everything. Well, then sit down whether weekly or monthly and just track the receipts so that at least you'll know, put them in a folder, so that you can keep track of those. But definitely at least once a week, try to get those receipts out of your wallet and put them someplace else, but also, and that could be a folder, that could be scanning them. But then, of course, in the business arena, definitely once a month, let's try to get those receipts. Let's try not to be scrambling around because somebody's pressuring us to say, "Ah, we need your expense report." So let's This is a new year, so let's start doing that.
Understood. So I want to go into the for the avid uh, photographer, not necessarily a professional
Hmm.
photographer, for those of us that still have physical pictures, and also for digital pictures. So what's the best place to store them, to those are things that, believe it or not, I think at some point in time we do go through memory lane and we look at some of these pictures, and we're amazed about, particularly with your children, their growth, how old they are, also even just friends over time, kind of places where you were. And again, some of us use digital photos through our phones, and some of us still had the old photos that you developed. For some of us, if you all remember, we used to go to the pharmacy and get them developed, and then you get your pictures and whatnot, right? So what's the
Oh
best
yeah.
way to do that in order to keep the legacy of those pictures?
So for let's digital, really having a backup system. Now they have lots of different things where you can plug into the phone and it'll just download all the pictures, and then you can have them cloud
Mm-hmm.
based. But also just periodically go through your phone. I mean, we all, when we taking the pictures, we take, well, at least I know the younger generation, younger than me, they take like 5 and 6 of the pictures. You don't need all those pictures. Just take the
Mm-hmm.
one that you really like and get rid of the rest so that you can, open up storage on your digital devices. With physical pictures, it's very important, and I learned this from someone who actually that's what they do, her
Mm.
company does. They help people organize and preserve.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Never have never have your pictures stored near a water source. And that was an eye opener for
Mm.
me. Because she said if there's ever a pipe busting or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, that could ruin them. So move them. And also, there are watertight containers available
Okay.
now. So you can put them in there. But also, even with those, go through them. My mother was a photographer, so she had pictures from at least, probably before, at least
Oh, wow.
1923. That's when she was born, up until, of course, she had
Right.
me and
Right.
beyond. So basically, I went through all those pictures, and anything that was, it wasn't a relative, it wasn't really anything. It was like maybe my cousins and my aunts. I basically sat there because she was one of 10. So I sat there and divided all of her siblings, their children, because, for me personally, Sharon, I didn't really need all of those pictures. I wanted pictures of my
Mm-hmm.
mother and, of course, pictures of my grandparents and when the group pictures. But, the picture of my cousin when he was, a
Sure.
baby in his Easter
Sure.
outfit, now he's like 6, 7. I don't need that picture. So, and it's just knowing when you can just let go of those pictures, but keeping and preserving, and make sure you preserve them. But again, get them away from those water sources. Move them. And I thought about that, and I started thinking, like, where's the water source? Oh yeah, and I started moving stuff, putting them in the containers. So that's one way that really help you with
That's a
those.
really good idea, because I mean, I didn't think about the water source as well, because if you had kept things in the basement, most times what goes in the basement goes into the abyss, right? So it's kind of like forgotten, and then something catalyst will help you to look at it
Hmm.
again, because there's some catastrophe that has happened to your basement. And so that's interesting. I really like that tip, because then if you do have some of those, then you need to move them away from peril, so that you can salvage those pictures. Because I do think that saving some of those, like particularly earlier years, it's interesting in the way that pictures have evolved. At the same time, it's that keeping the integrity of that picture, and just kind of
Hmm.
seeing it for its the way it looks, and in the way the classic, in the way that we don't have it now. There's still something, I think, I find merit about black and white pictures that still speak volumes in the way that's different from
Oh yeah.
color, in the time that it was intended to. So, oh, great! We definitely going to want to put that in the basement. I mean, not in the basement, but in a watertight container, and at least above the area where we think it would be, away from water. So as I was,
And also sharing
oh yeah,
above
above,
too.
yeah.
Make sure you know where those water
Oh,
sources
that's true
above are
too.
as
Yes,
well.
yes, because above could also come down, and versus it also
Yep.
kind of coming.
Mhm.
It's just not on the
Mhm.
ground or things like that. No, perfect. That's a great tip. So for all you good folks that have basement, not every one of us in the world in the states have basement, but for those of us that do, those are things to consider. Probably your attic would be, if you don't have a basement, something to consider in the way of, like, if it bots or something that is, like, perishable up there over time,
Mhm.
or a roof, for example. If something happens to your roof and it happens to get to your attic, things like that. So, which is why, hence, they're disaster, not necessarily something of our own control. What's interesting, as I was listening to you, in the way that you help declutter and organize, is that there's a process, right? In all of this, I think that we I don't want to. I'd be remiss if we don't talk about that in a way of process, because you're identifying what the problem you're solving for, right? You're obviously looking at the state of um, chaos, or I want to say disorganization, because some folks have a organized chaos. I don't really know exactly how that sounds,
That's true.
but for them, it makes sense. For us that are linear, logical, it's kind of chaotic to our eyes. So you've identified a problem, and clearly you need tools and habits and systems to be able to execute what that looks like for you. When I'm coming to you, Janet, and I say, you know what, I've had enough now. I think I need to change my ways. I need to come now here, but here had always been my process. And so how do I then change that? Because you help us by changing our process, meaning that we now have to find a way to be a little bit more organized, and not just, I'm going
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
plot my paper here, or I'm going to, do that. Now, some folks will revert. I'm sure you've seen some folks that have reverted, but I think for the most part, if you're anchored in sustaining your new habits, you've introduced that process, and it's a new process improvement in your life. So there's a tie-in that I want to just bring out, in the way that when you start decluttering something, you are assessing your situation. You're identifying that something in my process broke, that I can't see anymore, that I now need to help for Janet to help me to get me to a baseline of an organized self. And then from there, I can move forward to my new process, and I can anchor and sustain that, and live a different way. If I'm starting to minimize what I have at home, then that's what I'm going to be now. It's different. I've come to see a different path. And I just want to encourage folks that it's not just in the workplace, it's also at home. There are certain routines and certain, like you also mentioned, workflow, certain processes that you do out of the barrier of routine, that then you need to improve. So it's not just workplace, and I want to bring that up because I think the two can tie together. There's definitely a
Mhm.
tie-in, because you're helping them see something that is not usable anymore in their process, and they need to come into a better way. So I like that you're helping them in two things that, unbeknownst to them, they're probably entering into a new way of doing things, and then also helping them clear out their fog, in what you're seeing and what you're trying to do. So, is there anything else that you want to add for, like, a tips, and when folks are starting to recognize that, oh, you know what, maybe I need to take a look at this. I know it's the beginning of the year, but I'm gonna put that off to the summer or spring because it's warm weather, whatever the case may be, when they sign. Is there anything that you want to add?
Well, I think the one thing I want to add, Sharon, is that with organizing, whether it's the office or whether it's your home, is that yes, there's processes, yes, there's habits, there's routines, but also what's important is creating a system really that makes you comfortable and more or less around the way you work and
Mm-hmm.
live. For example, you come home, you throw your shoes off by the door.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, with that, it's just not really almost changing the habit, just enhancing it by just putting a shoe rack or a shoe closet. Or in the office, maybe you're in the habit of just, you're getting memos and information and all these things, and you just had a habit of just putting them in the corner of your desk. Well, that could be getting a desktop tray,
Mhm.
and really just having one space for that, so that whenever you are looking for whatever that piece of paper is, that you actually have a location to go to. And it's the same with even our electronics, where we have them, the accessories, whether they're in our office or in our home, is having a container with all the accessories, whether they're the cords, the attachments, the this, the that. But just so it's really kinds of looking at what we need, how we operate, how we function, but just really creating something around it. Because one of the misconceptions is a lot of times when people would have an organizer come in, whether it's their office or their home, they want to clean up everything. But we need to see how you function. So once we see how you function, then we can figure out, okay, they like putting things here, so maybe we need a system right here. People come in sometimes and they like putting things like the keys, the hats, the this and the that by the door. Well, then that means there needs to be a system by the door for that. So I want to let people, kind of share that with people. And also, for those of you watching, if you do have storage space, because storage
Mhm.
space is really just a place where we just put things and just forget about it.
Mhm.
If you have at least two, try to downsize to one, but just try to not overwhelm yourself, and maybe just go in just every now and then, taking a box out, seeing what's in there. Because again, 80% of the stuff we keep, we never reference again. So is that stuff in there something from your past that you don't even need anymore? So think about that as well.
I love that part that you said that come in as is. When you hire an organizer, you leave it as is, and because you guys have to observe how it is that you do things, and that's important. And also that there's no judgment in the way of seeing how you do things. It helps us understand how what it is that is in your mind and how do you do them
Mhm.
on a day-to-day basis, so we know, like you said, you're not really taking them too completely out of what they normally are doing. You're just helping them that instead of just like throwing it or just kind of tossing it or just in a way, you're saying, okay, hey, now you got this little basket here, or now you have this something to put on, which requires observation. You wouldn't necessarily know that this is what they do, if they just toss their keys, over by like a table or something like that, or
Mhm.
their mail goes with them, or they're like an all, and their mail is like right at the corner of this space in their dining table. So like things like that, it's important to observe. It really is, and I think that's great. I'm glad you emphasize that, because you're right, folks will start to like clean up, and they're like, oh my gosh, she's coming, and I'm going to look like a hot mess. But it's really like, how do we help you if you're not showing us your current state in the way that you do things? It's so that we can help you build out a future state that is, again, like you said, not far away from what you normally do in a day-to-day basis, but help you and help you a little bit better with that. And it's the same with
Mhm.
process, right? You kind of have to look at what your state is, your current state of events. That doesn't mean that, like you said, what you have now is effective. It might have been at the time. It's no longer now. And so now you got to kind of have to look at that and say, oh, I do need to do something about that. And the other thing I wanted to ask you too, the garage, because I feel like the garage has become an extension of storage. And I want to wrap it up here because, the garage is meant to have your car put in, right? And there's hence the reason for the garage. But is there a way to kind of like approach the garage where you can organize it and you can keep it away from like as a quote unquote storage space?
Well, I think with the garage, how you would first of all want to tackle it, you may want to tackle it in phases. Get rid of the trash, the recycles. Then the next thing you just go through and decide what you need to really truly donate, give away. For example, there may be a tricycle in the
Mhm.
corner, but that tricycle may belong to your youngest who now is on their third car. Do you need to keep the tricycle?
Right.
So, and then once you're left with what is going to stay, organize the things so that they can be on the wall, pegboards, all kind of wonderful solutions. And then that way you can actually park the car in there. But basically get rid of everything that just needs to go. Because it does. It's easy for us to take things from our home and just stick it in the garage because then nobody has to see it except for family. So just think about that, as you get into warmer weather, begin to just get rid of what you don't need. And then, of course, organize what you do. And then, hopefully, by the end of that project, you will actually have room for some of the things that you actually want to have access to in that space.
Fantastic. Now, how do we reach you? If we, we are in need of our organizer, we are up to our eyeballs into things. What's the best way to reach you? And then tell me, like, well, how do we walk me through, your process?
So, of course, you can reach me at my website, janetmtaylor.com, or you can reach me on Instagram, Janet the Organizer. And in regards to my process for keeping myself organized, and just my process. Okay, my process for keeping myself organized is really I go through seasonal
Okay.
organizing with paperwork, with clothes, with just
Hmm.
stuff. Specifically at the end of the year, I do not like to enter a new year with stuff I don't need. And I also realize as I get older, my systems are going to change and also the things that I want to hold on. So just because of the system I had in my 20s is not working as I'm in my 50 plus era of life. And not only in my life, but also in my office as well. There's things that I had, tools that I was using, and it's like, I don't need these anymore. So it's knowing as you go through life changes, whether your age changes or either just life, you got single, then you got, you're in a partnership or marriage. The next thing you know, the kids are coming along, the pets are coming along, and everybody else. So just
Hmm.
knowing when you go through those life changes, your system's going to change as well.
Well, Janet, thank you for being my guest. I definitely learned a lot. I'm going to execute some of those things that you have given to me as tidbits. Folks, I hope that, you've learned quite a bit as I have. And I really appreciate Janet being here. And should you need her, services, please reach out. She gave her website. She also, Janet will organize you. So believe you me, she will definitely get you on the straight and narrow. So thank you again, Janet. I so appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Sharon. It's always a pleasure.